The dust never settled on Haven's edge. It hung in the air like a red fog, coating everything with the fine particles of crushed stone and metal. 8-year-old Tommy Reed pressed his nose against the transport window, watching the mining platforms grow smaller as they moved away from the main colony. His father David sat beside him, checking readings on his tablet while the hover truck bounced along the rough terrain. "Dad, why do we have to go so far out?" Tommy asked, his breath fogging the glass. The landscape outside looked empty and scary. Rocky hills stretched toward distant mountains, and strange purple plants grew between the rocks like twisted fingers. "The new mining site needs inspection," David said without looking up. "The machines have been acting strange lately. Something's interfering with their sensors." He ruffled Tommy's brown hair. "Don't worry. We'll be back before dinner." The truck stopped near a cluster of drilling equipment. David grabbed his tools and climbed out, leaving Tommy in the vehicle. "Stay right here, okay? Don't wander off. This place isn't safe for little boys." Tommy nodded, but as soon as his father disappeared behind the machinery, boredom set in. The truck felt hot and stuffy. Through the window, he could see interesting rock formations that looked like castles. A small canyon caught his attention, its walls carved with natural patterns that reminded him of the picture books his mother used to read to him before she died. Minutes passed like hours. Tommy opened the door and stepped onto the dusty ground. He told himself he would just look at the rocks and come right back. The canyon was only a few steps away, and he could still hear his father's tools clanging against metal. The canyon was cooler and filled with shadows. Strange echoes bounced off the walls, and Tommy thought he heard something that sounded like music. He followed the sound deeper into the narrow passage, his small feet crunching on loose stones. The walls grew taller around him, blocking out most of the red sky above. That's when he saw the eyes. They glowed amber in the darkness, positioned high above his head. Tommy froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. The eyes belonged to something huge, something that moved with deadly silence despite its size. As his vision adjusted to the gloom, Tommy saw the full shape of the creature. It stood 7 feet tall on 4 powerful legs. Its body was covered in dark fur that seemed to absorb light, and massive claws extended from each paw. The head was wolf-like but larger, with ears that twitched at every small sound. This was a ravenclaw, one of the most feared predators in known space. Tommy had seen pictures of them in his school books, usually with warnings about how dangerous they were. Though, Beast stepped closer, its massive head lowering to Tommy's level. Hot breath washed over the boy's face, smelling of meat and wild spaces. Tommy wanted to run, but his legs felt like rubber. He wanted to scream, but no sound came from his throat. All he could do was stare into those burning amber eyes and wait for the end. But the Ravenclaw didn't attack. Instead, it tilted its head to one side, studying the small human with what looked almost like curiosity. Its ears swiveled forward, and a low rumble came from deep in its chest. Not a growl of aggression, but something else. Something Tommy didn't understand. Then came the howls. They echoed through the canyon from multiple directions, high-pitched and hungry. The Ravenclaw's head snapped up, its ears flattening against its skull. The rumble in its chest became a deep, warning growl. Tommy heard the sound of claws scraping against stone, and shadows moved at the edges of his vision. Thornhounds. Smaller than the Ravenclaw but much more vicious, they hunted in packs and feared nothing. 5 of them emerged from cracks in the canyon walls, their red eyes fixed on Tommy. Their bodies were lean and built for speed, with needle-sharp teeth that dripped saliva. They had caught his scent and wanted fresh meat. The lead thornhound crept forward, its belly low to the ground. The others spread out, surrounding Tommy from all sides. He was trapped between the pack and the Ravenclaw, certain that he was about to be torn apart by one predator or another. But something unexpected happened. The Ravenclaw moved between Tommy and the pack. It planted itself like a living wall, its massive form blocking the Thornhound's path to the boy. The creature's hackles rose, making it look even larger, and it released a roar that shook dust from the canyon walls. The message was clear. They would have to go through it to reach the child. The Thornhounds hesitated. They were used to easy prey, not a fight with an apex predator. But hunger made them bold, and the pack leader lunged forward with a snarl. What followed was brutal and swift. The Ravenclaw caught the attacking Thornhound in mid-leap, its massive jaws closing around the smaller predator's neck. The sound of breaking bones echoed through the canyon. The other Thornhounds attacked together, trying to overwhelm their larger opponent through numbers and speed. The Ravenclaw fought like a force of nature. Its claws raked across one attacker's side, sending it tumbling into the rocks. Another Thornhound managed to clamp its teeth on the big predator's leg, but the Ravenclaw shook it off and crushed it with a powerful stomp. Blood splattered the canyon walls as the battle raged. Tommy pressed himself against the stone, watching in amazement and terror. The great beast was bleeding from multiple wounds, but it never gave ground. Every time a Thornhound tried to circle around toward Tommy, the Ravenclaw moved to block its path. It was protecting him, actually protecting him from the pack. The remaining Thornhounds realized they were beaten. With yips of pain and frustration, they retreated into the shadows, leaving their dead packmates behind. The Ravenclaw stood victorious, but wounded, blood dripping from cuts on its legs and side. In the sudden silence, Tommy and the beast looked at each other. The boy's fear had changed to wonder. This creature, this monster from his nightmares, had saved his life. Why? What did it want from him? The Ravenclaw took a careful step closer, then another. Tommy didn't run. Something in those amber eyes told him he was safe. When the great head lowered to his level again, Tommy slowly reached out his small hand and touched the creature's bloodied snout. The contact sent a strange warmth through both of them, as if something had connected on a level deeper than understanding. In that moment, everything changed, though neither the boy nor the beast could know it yet. The galaxy itself had just witnessed something that would shake the foundations of everything it thought it knew about intelligence, empathy, and the bonds between species. From somewhere in the distance came the sound of David's voice, calling Tommy's name with growing panic. The emergency beacon's sharp wail cut through the afternoon air as David Reed's panicked voice crackled over the colony's communication system. Captain Mills grabbed his rifle and motioned for his security team to follow him to the transport bay. Finding a missing child on Haven's Edge meant racing against time, especially when that child had wandered into predator territory. "How long has the boy been gone?" Mills asked as they loaded into the armed hover vehicle. His weathered face showed the strain of too many rescue missions that ended badly. 20 minutes, maybe 30, David said, his hands shaking as he tried to work his scanner. "I was checking the drilling equipment when I noticed the truck door was open. His tracks lead toward Echo Canyon." Mills cursed under his breath. Echo Canyon was a known hunting ground for thornhounds and worse things. The narrow passages created perfect ambush sites, and the acoustic properties meant you couldn't hear predators coming until they were on top of you. 3 miners had died there last month despite being armed and traveling in groups. The hover vehicle bounced across the rocky terrain, its engines whining with effort. Through the windscreen, Mills could see the canyon entrance growing larger. Dark stone walls stretched up toward the red sky like the mouth of some ancient giant. His team checked their weapons one more time, knowing that bullets might not be enough against what they could face inside. "There," David pointed toward the canyon mouth. "I can see his footprints in the dust." They landed the vehicle and moved forward on foot. Mills took point, his rifle ready while 2 of his men flanked him. David stayed close behind, his face pale with fear. The canyon walls closed around them, creating deep shadows despite the afternoon sun. The smell hit them first, blood and death mixed with something wild and dangerous. Mills raised his fist, signaling the team to stop. Ahead, they could hear voices. Not human voices, but the deep rumble of something large and the higher whimpers of pain. They rounded a bend in the passage and froze at the sight before them. Tommy Reed sat cross-legged on the canyon floor, his small hand resting on the massive head of a ravenclaw. The beast lay beside him, its dark fur matted with blood from several wounds. Around them, the bodies of dead thornhounds littered the ground like broken toys. "Sweet mother of stars," whispered Mills. In 30 years of security work, he had never seen anything like this. Ravenclaws were killing machines, apex predators that attacked anything that moved. They didn't protect human children. They ate them. The Ravenclaw's amber eyes fixed on the security team, and its lips pulled back to reveal teeth like ivory daggers. But it made no move to attack. Instead, it shifted its body to keep Tommy behind it, between the boy and the approaching humans. "Dad!" Tommy called out, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Look, I made a friend! He saved me from the bad dogs!" David took a step forward, but Mills grabbed his arm. "Don't! That thing could tear the boy in half before we could blink." "But it's not hurting him," David said, his voice filled with confusion. "Look at it. It's protecting Tommy." Mills studied the scene more carefully. The Ravenclaw was indeed wounded, with deep cuts along its side and legs where thornhound teeth and claws had found their mark. But despite its injuries, it remained alert and positioned between Tommy and any potential threat. Its body language spoke of protection, not aggression. "I need to call this in," Mills said, reaching for his communicator. "Command needs to see this." The conversation with Colony headquarters was brief but intense. Within minutes, a medical team was dispatched along with a xenobiology specialist. The footage from Mills's helmet camera was transmitted directly to the Galactic Federation, where it would eventually reach the highest levels of government. Dr. Lisa Chen arrived first, her medical bag slung over her shoulder and a look of disbelief on her face. She was the colony's chief physician and had treated countless injuries from predator attacks. But she had never been called to treat both a human child and the predator that should have killed him. "The boy appears unharmed," she reported after. "A quick examination." Tommy remained calm throughout, one hand still resting on the Ravenclaw's head. The creature watched every movement, but allowed the doctor to approach. "What about the animal?" Mills asked. Dr. Chen looked at the wounded predator with professional interest. "It needs medical attention. Deep lacerations, possible internal bleeding. But I'm not qualified to treat a Ravenclaw. We need a veterinary xenobiologist." "I am," said a new voice from the canyon entrance. Dr. Rivera emerged from the shadows, her equipment case in hand. She was the Federation's leading expert on alien predators, called in from the research station 3 systems away. "I came as soon as I saw the transmission." She approached the Ravenclaw slowly, her movements careful and controlled. The beast watched her with intelligent eyes, but made no threatening gestures. When she knelt beside its wounded flank, it actually lifted its head to give her better access to the injuries. "Remarkable," Dr. Rivera murmured as she began cleaning the wounds. "The damage is consistent with thornhound attacks, 5 of them from the bite patterns. This creature fought off an entire pack." She looked up at Mills. "And you say it was protecting the boy?" "See for yourself," Mills replied, gesturing toward Tommy. The child had fallen asleep against the Ravenclaw's side, using the creature's massive form as a pillow. The predator's breathing had slowed to match the boy's, creating a synchronized rhythm that seemed impossible. Dr. Rivera worked in silence for several minutes, cleaning and sealing the wounds with medical foam. The Ravenclaw submitted to her treatment without complaint, though its eyes never left Tommy's sleeping form. "I need to take tissue samples," she said finally. "Blood work, genetic analysis. Something's happening here that doesn't match any known behavioral patterns." As if understanding her words, the Ravenclaw extended one massive paw, allowing her to take blood samples from the pad. Its cooperation was voluntary and complete, as if it wanted to help her understand what had happened. "The Federation Council is calling an emergency session," Mills announced, reading from his communicator. "They want a full report and live video feed. This is being classified as a contact event." The implications hung heavy in the canyon air. Contact events were reserved for encounters with previously unknown intelligent species. If the Federation was classifying this incident as such, it meant they believed the Ravenclaw had demonstrated intelligence and reasoning ability beyond that of a simple predator. Tommy stirred in his sleep, and the Ravenclaw immediately adjusted, its position to keep him comfortable. The gesture was so gentle, so unmistakably caring, that even the hardened security officers felt moved by it. "What do we call it?" David asked, his fear replaced by wonder. Tommy opened his eyes and smiled, up at his father. "His name is Guardian," the boy said with the simple certainty of childhood. "He told me so." The Ravenclaw rumbled deep in its chest, a sound of contentment that seemed to agree with the chosen name. In that moment, everyone present understood they were witnessing history. The relationship between predator and prey, between human and alien, between fear and trust, had fundamentally changed. Guardian had defended a human child not from instinct or training, but from choice. And that choice would echo across the galaxy, challenging everything the civilized worlds thought they knew about intelligence, consciousness, and the capacity for love that transcended species barriers. The universe had just become a much more complex and wonderful place. 3 weeks after the incident in Echo Canyon, Haven's Edge had transformed from a forgotten mining outpost into the most watched location in the galaxy. Research vessels crowded the orbital space above the planet, while the colony itself bustled, with scientists, journalists, and Federation officials, all because of an 8-year-old boy and his unlikely friend. Dr. Rivera stood in the newly constructed observation center, watching through reinforced glass as Tommy played with Guardian in the enclosed habitat they had built, the Ravenclaws. Wounds had healed completely, but the creature showed no interest in returning to the wild. Instead, it remained constantly near the boy, following him like a massive, deadly shadow. "Any progress on the neural scans?" asked Director Hayes as he joined Rivera at the viewing window. The Federation official had arrived that morning, his face grim with the weight of decisions that could affect billions of lives. "More than we hoped for," Rivera replied, pulling up data on her tablet. "Guardian's brain activity is unlike anything we've seen in predator species. The neural pathways show complex pattern recognition, emotional processing, and what appears to be abstract reasoning." Through the glass, Tommy was teaching Guardian to play fetch with a rubber ball. The massive creature would carefully take the ball in its jaws, being extremely gentle not to puncture it, then carry it back to the boy. Each time Tommy praised the Ravenclaw, its brain scans showed activity in regions associated with pleasure and satisfaction. But that's not the strangest part, Rivera continued. "Watch this." She activated a recording from the previous day. In it, Tommy approached Guardian while crying, having scraped his knee during play. The Ravenclaw immediately moved to the boy, using its massive head to gently nuzzle him while making soft, rumbling sounds. Guardian can identify human emotional states with 97% accuracy. Fear, joy, sadness, anger. It responds appropriately to all of them. Director Hayes frowned. Emotional recognition isn't that unusual. Many species can read basic emotional cues. Not like this, Rivera said, switching to another recording. Yesterday, Tommy was playing with another child, Amanda, when she fell and hurt herself. Watch Guardian's reaction. The video showed Guardian, immediately moving to comfort Amanda, even though the creature had no previous relationship with her. The Ravenclaw positioned itself between the crying girl and the other adults until Tommy came to reassure his friend. Only then did Guardian step back. It's not just recognizing emotions, Rivera explained. Guardian is distinguishing between appropriate and inappropriate responses. It knows when to comfort, when to protect, and when to step back. That level of social understanding suggests intelligence that rivals our own. Director Hayes was quiet for a long moment watching Tommy and Guardian play together. The boy was teaching the creature to stack blocks, and Guardian was learning with remarkable speed. Each successful stack earned an encouraging rumble and a gentle head bump from the massive predator. "What about the reports from other worlds?" Hayes asked. Rivera's expression grew more serious. "That's where things get really interesting. We now have confirmed incidents on 17 different planets. In every case, predatory species have shown protective behavior toward humans in distress." She brought up a holographic display showing incident reports from across Federation space. On Kepler Station, a pack of crystalline hunters had surrounded and protected a lost human survey team during a storm. On New Brisbane, metallic serpents had fought off aggressive local fauna to defend a human research camp. Each incident involved different species, different circumstances, but the same pattern of protection. "The xenobiology teams are calling it the Guardian effect," Rivera continued. "Whatever is causing this behavior, it's not limited to Ravenclaws or even to this planet. Something about humans triggers protective instincts in predator species across multiple star systems." Director Hayes studied the data with growing concern. "Any theories on the mechanism?" "Several, but one stands out." Rivera pulled up brain scans showing unusual activity patterns. "Dr. Kim from the Quantum Consciousness Institute believes we're dealing with quantum-level neural field interactions. When humans experience intense emotions, especially protective, instincts, or fear, their brains generate quantum signatures that certain species can detect and interpret. The implications were staggering. If humans were unconsciously broadcasting their emotional states through quantum fields, it would explain not just Guardian's behavior, but the similar incidents across the galaxy. More importantly, it suggested that consciousness and empathy operated on fundamental forces of the universe that had been previously unknown. "Has anyone tried to measure these supposed quantum fields?" Hayes asked. "Dr. Kim's team is working on it now," Rivera replied. "They've detected unusual quantum fluctuations around Tommy when he's emotional, but the equipment needed for precise measurement won't arrive for another week." Through the observation window, they watched as Tommy accidentally dropped a block tower he had been building. His face crumpled with disappointment, and immediately Guardian moved closer, using one massive paw to gently pat the boy's shoulder. The creature's brain scans showed intense activity in empathy-related regions. "There's something else," Rivera said quietly. "Guardian isn't just responding to Tommy's emotions. It's learning from them. Watch this morning's recordings." The new video showed Tommy reading a picture book to Guardian. As the story progressed, showing various characters experiencing different emotions, Guardian's neural activity matched the emotional content of the narrative. When the story showed a character being afraid, Guardian's fear responses activated. When the character felt joy, Guardian showed corresponding pleasure patterns. "It's developing emotional intelligence through interaction with Tommy," Rivera explained. "The creature is literally learning to understand and experience emotions it never had before. We're watching the birth of a new kind of consciousness." Director Hayes stepped closer to the glass. Guardian had noticed them watching and turned its massive head toward the observation window. For a moment, human and predator locked eyes across the reinforced barrier. There was no aggression in the Ravenclaw's gaze, only curious intelligence. "What does the Federation Council want us to do?" Rivera asked. "That depends on your final assessment," Hayes replied. "If this is just an anomaly, we can classify it as a curiosity and move on. But if what you're describing is real, if we're dealing with quantum-level empathic connections between species, then everything changes." Rivera looked back at Tommy and Guardian, watching the boy giggle as the massive creature tried to fit a small block in its mouth. Director, what we're seeing here challenges our fundamental understanding of consciousness, intelligence, and the nature of empathy itself. These aren't just random protective behaviors. They're evidence of a universal language of emotion that transcends species barriers. She paused, considering her next words carefully. Guardian doesn't just protect Tommy because of instinct or programming. It protects him because it has learned to care about him. And if a predator species can learn to care about humans through quantum emotional connection, then we need to reconsider our definitions of intelligence and sentience. Through the observation window, Tommy had fallen asleep curled against Guardian's side. The massive predator remained perfectly still, its breathing synchronized with the boy's, its eyes watchful and protective. In the growing dusk light, they looked like the most natural thing in the world. A child and his guardian, connected by bonds deeper than species, deeper than evolution, deeper than anything the galaxy had previously understood about the nature of consciousness itself. The investigation was far from over, but already its implications were reshaping how the Federation viewed intelligence, emotion, and the mysterious connections that bound all living things together across the vast darkness of space. Professor Kim stared at the quantum field readings in disbelief. The sophisticated detection equipment had been running for 3 days, monitoring Tommy and Guardian during their daily activities. What the instruments revealed challenged the very foundations of physics and biology. "Run the analysis again," she told her research assistant, Dr. Park. "I need to be absolutely certain before we present this to the Council." The quantum laboratory buzzed with activity as teams of physicists and biologists worked around the clock. Through the observation window, they could see Tommy playing with Guardian in the habitat next door. The boy was teaching the Ravenclaw to recognize different colored shapes, and the massive predator was learning with startling speed. "The results are consistent across all trials," Dr. Park reported. When Tommy experiences strong emotions, his neural activity generates quantum field fluctuations that propagate outward in measurable waves. The frequency patterns match mathematical models for quantum-entangled consciousness. Professor Kim studied the data streams flowing across multiple screens. Each emotional spike from Tommy created corresponding reactions in Guardian's brain, but the connection went deeper than simple cause and effect. The quantum fields were actually synchronizing their neural patterns, creating a shared emotional state between human and predator. "Show me the incident from yesterday," Kim said. The recording began with Tommy playing peacefully while Guardian dozed nearby. Then Amanda, another colony child, entered the habitat and accidentally knocked over a stack of toys Tommy had carefully arranged. The boy's frustration and disappointment registered immediately on the quantum sensors as sharp spikes in the field around him. But something remarkable happened next. Guardian's brain activity shifted to match Tommy's emotional state, and the Ravenclaw moved to comfort the boy before Tommy had even expressed his feelings outwardly. The creature had felt the child's distress through the quantum connection and responded instinctively. "The synchronization is extraordinary," Dr. Park observed. "Guardian isn't just reading Tommy's emotions. It's experiencing them directly through quantum neural entanglement." Professor Kim pulled up comparative data from other worlds. "And this pattern is repeating across 17 star systems. Predator species that have never encountered humans before are showing the same quantum field responses when humans experience intense emotions nearby." The implications were staggering. If emotional states could propagate through quantum fields, it meant consciousness itself operated on principles that transcended biological boundaries. Fear, love, protective instincts, empathy. These weren't just chemical reactions in organic brains. They were fundamental forces of the universe that could be shared between entirely different species. Director Hayes entered the laboratory with Admiral Stone, the highest-ranking military officer in the Federation. Both men looked exhausted from emergency sessions with the Galactic Council, where the discovery's implications were being hotly debated. "What's the current assessment?" Admiral Stone asked without preamble. Professor Kim activated the main display, showing quantum field patterns around Tommy and Guardian. "We're dealing with something unprecedented in scientific history. Human consciousness appears to be quantum entangled with the neural activity of certain predator species. When humans experience authentic emotional states, especially those involving protection of children or response to threats, they emit quantum signatures that these creatures can detect and interpret." She highlighted specific data points on the display. The key factor seems to be emotional authenticity. Fake or manufactured emotions don't generate the same quantum signatures, but genuine fear, love, protective instincts, or empathy create field patterns that predator species recognize and respond to instinctively. Admiral Stone studied the readings with military precision. "Are you saying these creatures can read our thoughts?" "Not thoughts exactly," Professor Kim replied. "They're responding to emotional authenticity. Predator species have evolved to read prey behavior for survival. What we're seeing is an extension of that ability into quantum realms. They can sense when human emotions are genuine versus when they're deceptive or artificial." Director Hayes frowned. "What makes human emotions special? Why don't we see this? Effect between other species? That's the most remarkable discovery," Professor Kim said, bringing up comparative analysis charts. "Humans appear to have an unusually broad emotional spectrum combined with intense quantum neural activity. Our capacity for empathy, our ability to feel protective instincts toward non-relatives, our complex emotional responses to abstract concepts, these generate quantum signatures that are both powerful and recognizable to predator consciousness." Through the observation window, Tommy was showing Guardian pictures in a book. Each image that depicted children or families caused both human and predator to show increased activity in emotional processing centers. They were literally sharing the emotional content of the story through quantum connection. "There's more," Dr. Park added, pulling up recordings from other incidents across the galaxy. "The predator species showing Guardian behavior all have similar neural structures, highly developed sensory processing, complex territorial instincts, and sophisticated social hierarchies. They're essentially evolved to understand and respond to emotional authenticity." Admiral Stone watched Guardian gently help Tommy build a tower of blocks. "These creatures are recognizing something in us that we barely understand ourselves." "Exactly," Professor Kim agreed. "Human emotional intelligence operates on quantum principles. When a parent protects a child, when someone shows genuine empathy for others, when people experience authentic fear or love, these emotions create quantum signatures that transcend species boundaries. Predator species evolved to read survival-related emotional states, now recognize and respond to the authenticity of human emotional experience." The revelation explained everything. Guardian's protection of Tommy wasn't random behavior or trained response. The Ravenclaw had sensed the boy's genuine fear and innocence through quantum emotional fields and had responded with its own authentic protective instincts. The creature experienced Tommy's emotions as if they were its own, creating an empathic bond that superseded predatory programming. "What about the military implications?" Admiral Stone asked. "If hostile species can read our emotional states?" "The effect seems limited to genuine empathy and protective behaviors," Professor Kim replied. "We haven't observed responses to aggressive or deceptive emotional states. If anything, this discovery suggests that authentic empathy and care for others might be universal languages that promote cooperation rather than conflict." Director Hayes looked at the data one more time. "So you're telling me that when humans show genuine care and protection for others, especially children, we're broadcasting that empathy across the universe through quantum fields?" "That's exactly what we're telling you," Professor Kim confirmed. "Human emotional authenticity, particularly our capacity for selfless protection and empathy, operates on fundamental forces that connect all consciousness. What Tommy and Guardian demonstrate isn't an anomaly, It's evidence of universal principles, of consciousness and empathy that we've never recognized before. Through the observation window, Tommy had fallen asleep reading to Guardian. The massive raven claw carefully adjusted its position to provide the perfect sleeping spot for the child, its movements impossibly gentle for such a powerful predator. The quantum field readings showed their neural patterns had synchronized into peaceful harmony. The boy and the beast were no longer separate beings connected by chance. They were living proof that consciousness, empathy, and love operated on, principles that transcended the boundaries between species, worlds, and the vast darkness of space itself. And that revelation would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about intelligence, emotion, and the invisible bonds that connected all living things across the universe. 5 years had passed since that day in Echo Canyon, and the galaxy would never be the same. Tommy Reed, now 13 and taller than most adults, stood before the Galactic Federation Assembly alongside Guardian, who had grown even larger and more magnificent with age. Today marked the final vote on the Universal Empathy Accords, the most significant legislation in galactic history. The assembly hall stretched beyond sight, filled with representatives from thousands of worlds, but all eyes were focused on the human boy and his Ravenclaw companion as they approached the central speaking platform. Guardian moved with fluid grace despite his massive size, his amber eyes scanning the crowd with calm intelligence. He wore no restraints, needed no handlers. The bond between him and Tommy had become so strong that they moved and thought almost as one. "Honored delegates," Tommy began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. 5 years ago, my friend Guardian saved my life. Today, we ask you to recognize that his actions weren't those of a trained animal or programmed machine, but of a conscious being capable of choice, empathy, and love. The assembly listened in respectful silence. Everyone present had seen the documentation, the quantum field studies, the evidence from dozens of worlds where predator species had formed similar bonds with humans. The Guardian effect, as it came to be known, had fundamentally changed how the galaxy understood consciousness and intelligence. Senator Walsh of New Terra rose to address the assembly. The evidence is clear that certain species can form empathic connections with humans through quantum neural fields, but intelligence and consciousness are different from emotional response. How do we know these creatures are truly sentient and not simply reacting to quantum stimuli? Tommy looked at Guardian, and something passed between them that needed no words. The Ravenclaw stepped forward, and using one massive claw with incredible precision, began drawing symbols in the sand-covered floor of the platform. The symbols were mathematical equations, complex formulas that described quantum field interactions and consciousness theory. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Guardian was not just responding to emotional cues, he was demonstrating abstract reasoning, mathematical understanding, and symbolic communication. The equations he drew were correct, showing a deep comprehension of the very principles that governed his bond with Tommy. Dr. Rivera, now head of the Galactic Consciousness Institute, provided scientific commentary. Guardian has learned written language, mathematical principles, and abstract reasoning through his connection with Tommy. More importantly, he has taught these concepts to other Ravenclaws on Haven's Edge. We're witnessing the emergence of a new form of consciousness, one that bridges the gap between instinct and intellect through empathic quantum connection. The testimony continued for hours. Representatives from worlds across the galaxy shared their own experiences with the Guardian effect. On Altair Prime, crystal hunters had learned to operate mining equipment by observing human workers they protected. On Vega Station, metallic serpents had begun creating art by watching human children draw. Each species developed new capabilities through empathic connection with humans, proving that consciousness could evolve and expand through emotional bonds. Admiral Stone, now retired but still influential, spoke on behalf of the military. Initial fears that predator species would exploit human emotions have proven unfounded. The Guardian effect only responds to authentic empathy and protective instincts. Attempts to weaponize or manipulate the connection have consistently failed. If anything, the presence of Guardian-bonded species has made contested regions more peaceful. The debate that followed was intense but respectful. Some delegates worried about the implications of granting full sentience rights to predator species. Others argued that consciousness was consciousness, regardless of its origin. The quantum field evidence was undeniable. These creatures demonstrated self-awareness, emotional depth, and abstract reasoning that met every standard for intelligent life. Chancellor Morrison called for the final vote. The motion before the Assembly is to pass the Universal Empathy Accords, recognizing quantum empathic consciousness as a valid form of sentience and granting full protection rights to species demonstrating Guardian effect behavior. The voting process took nearly an hour as delegates from thousands of worlds registered their decisions. Tommy waited patiently beside Guardian, both of them calm despite the enormous implications of the outcome. Win or lose, they had already proven that love and empathy could transcend any barrier. When Chancellor Morrison announced the results, the chamber erupted in celebration. The Universal Empathy Accords had passed by an overwhelming margin, with 93% of delegates voting in favor. For the first time in galactic history, consciousness based on empathic connection, rather than evolutionary development, would be recognized as valid sentience. The immediate changes were dramatic. Planets previously classified as hostile environments were reclassified as empathy-responsive ecosystems. New protocols were established for human settlements in regions with Guardian effect species, emphasizing cooperation and mutual protection rather than domination and exploitation. Military doctrine was revised to account for predator species that might actually defend human personnel rather than attack them. But the deeper changes went beyond policy and procedure. The Empathy Stations program launched within months of the Accord's passage, establishing joint research facilities on dozens of worlds where humans and Guardian-bonded species worked together to explore the quantum nature of consciousness. Each station became a center of unprecedented scientific discovery as different forms of intelligence collaborated to unlock the mysteries of empathic connection. Tommy became the first human interspecies ambassador, working with Guardian to develop communication protocols that had never been imagined before. Their partnership paved the way for similar bonds throughout human space, creating a network of empathic connections that strengthened rather than replaced traditional diplomatic relations. The transformation was perhaps most visible on Haven's Edge itself. The colony had evolved from a simple mining outpost into a thriving center of interspecies cooperation. Guardian's pack had grown to include dozens of Ravenclaws, all of whom had formed bonds with human families. Children grew up playing with massive predators as naturally as they might play with pets, while the Ravenclaws learned complex skills and concepts that elevated their intelligence to levels that rivaled their human partners. Dr. Rivera often watched from her research station as Tommy worked with Guardian to teach mathematical concepts to younger Ravenclaws. The sight never failed to amaze her. A teenage boy and an apex predator collaborating to expand the boundaries of consciousness and learning. Their quantum field readings showed perfect synchronization, a harmony of thought and emotion that represented the highest form of interspecies connection. The ripple effect spread throughout the galaxy. Other species began to take notice of the unique relationship between humans and empathy-responsive predators. Trade agreements included provisions for Guardian-bonded protection services. Exploration missions actively sought out empathy-responsive species as potential partners, rather than threats to be eliminated. The universe had become a more collaborative and connected place. Years later, when Tommy stood at the dedication ceremony for the first Galactic Empathy Institute, he reflected on how far they had all come. Guardian stood beside him, now ancient by Ravenclaw standards, but still magnificent and protective. Around them, representatives from hundreds of species gathered to celebrate the establishment of a research center dedicated to understanding consciousness in all its forms. "We started with a scared little boy and a creature everyone thought was a monster," Tommy said in his dedication speech. "But what we discovered was that consciousness, empathy, and love operate on principles that connect all living beings across the universe. The bonds we form through authentic emotion and genuine care transcend species, worlds, and the vast darkness between stars." He placed his hand on Guardian's massive head, feeling the familiar warmth of their quantum connection. "Today, we dedicate this institute not just to scientific research, but to the principle that consciousness comes in many forms, and that empathy is the universal language that allows different forms of intelligence to understand and support each other." Guardian rumbled his agreement, the sound carrying a depth of emotion and intelligence that few would have believed possible years earlier. Around the galaxy, similar partnerships were forming as humans and empathy-responsive species learned to work together in ways that benefited both civilizations. The Guardian effect had proven to be more than just an interesting biological phenomenon. It was evidence of fundamental forces that governed consciousness throughout the universe, forces that promoted cooperation, understanding, and mutual protection among intelligent beings. What had begun with one boy's terror in a canyon had become the foundation for a new era of galactic civilization based on empathy, connection, and the recognition that consciousness could take forms beyond anything previously imagined. As the ceremony concluded and delegates began to disperse, Tommy and Guardian remained on the platform, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Their bond had changed the galaxy, but for them, the most important thing remained the same: a friendship built on trust, protection, and love that transcended every boundary the universe could create. In the end, that simple connection between a human child and an alien predator had proven to be the most powerful force in known space, capable of reshaping laws, societies, and the very understanding of what it meant to be conscious and alive among the stars.